Friends, the wait is finally over. Eula has now officially come to Genshin Impact. This is a character that prior to release has been largely debated in regards to her overall strength and such, and so first and foremost allow me to be the one to tell you that she is ridiculously powerful. Hello and welcome to Whalestat. I am Sliceotaku. With this video we'll be covering the 5-star Cryo Claymore user, Eula. Specifically in terms of her talents, skills, optimal artifacts, weapons, teams, and constellations, all of which you can find timestamps for on the video and in the description. And so without further delay, let's get into Eula's talents. Eula's normal, charged, and plunge attacks of Favonius Bladework Edel, which apparently translates from German to be noble, are pretty baseline and what you may expect from a Claymore user. However, for me personally, her normal attacks feel really smooth. And I believe that's important to express because when it comes to a character preference, there are those who don't really care for how Claymore users feel during combat. But as opposed to her blade feeling especially heavy as it does with other characters, there is a certain grace afforded to her swings that perhaps by way of placebo makes her attack string feel a bit more controlled. And as we'll come to know, landing your normal attacks with this character is really important, so that is a benefit no doubt. Eula's elemental skill, Ice Tide Vortex, is something you'll always want to be incorporating into your combo strings. With a press of the skill, Eula lashes out with a swipe of cryo damage, and when it hits an opponent, Eula then receives 1 stack of Grim Heart, which can go up to a maximum of 2. As for what Grim Heart is, this is a buff that raises Eula's interruption resistance and provides a 30% bonus to defense per stack. Now, that resistance to interruption is nothing to scoff at, especially when it comes to our elemental burst, which we will get into. Being able to continuously dish out damage regardless of whatever is thrown at you is a powerful asset indeed. However, you may alternatively consume all of said Grimheart stacks by holding Eula's elemental skill instead. And in doing so, Eula reduces the physical and cryo damage resistances of enemies hit for a base of 16%. Not to mention that consumed stacks are further converted into what are called Ice Whirl brands, dealing cryo damage to enemies in proximity for a base of 96%. Glacial Illumination is Eula's elemental burst, and this is one of the scariest nukes in the game right now. People have been able to get the damage numbers of this thing up to the millions even. A feat certainly aided by a degree of whaling, sure, but even still, to even do a fraction of that is liable to kill just about anything currently in the game pretty easily. But yeah, with this one, Eula clutches onto her sword and whirls around, doing cryo damage to everything nearby. But that's just the beginning. From here, a Lightfall sword is generated which will follow her around for up to 7 seconds. And while it's around, that is another reduction to interruption. From there, the Lightfall sword can grow with the help of Eula's normal attack, skill, and burst, as whenever they do damage, they charge the sword with 1 stack every millisecond for a maximum of 30. And so that's why that resistance to interruption is oh so valuable, because you want to build up your Lightfall sword as much as possible before it drops. And when it does drop, it deals physical damage to all those nearby. At base, that is just about 75% physical damage per stack, with a base damage of approximately 367% at level 1. So at level 1, you can get up to an estimated 2,617% damage drop. That is absurd, but again, this is with the talent only being level 1. And in lowering the physical damage resistance of said enemies by way of your elemental skill, nothing will survive your onslaught. And furthermore, you can have the sword fall prematurely by switching to another character while it is up. This skill is somewhat on the more expensive side with the energy cost of 80, so a battery could really be a big help for her. Suffice to say, this talent is the one you will want to prioritize. The only looming issue with its burst being that Eula tends to kill everything before the sword can even fall. Now, moving to her passives, we firstly have Roiling Rhyme. If 2 stacks of Grimheart are consumed when you hold your elemental skill, what is essentially a mini Lightfall sword will explode immediately. And this one will do half of the base physical damage of the Lightfall sword from Eula's elemental burst. And so again, at only talent level 1, you are looking at 184% physical damage to drop. And this is on top of the cryo damage that holding already does. Ridiculous. To follow, we have Wellspring of Warlust. When Eula's elemental burst is used, the cooldown of her elemental skill is reset and she gains a stack of Grimheart automatically. This makes comboing with her even easier. Skill press, burst, skill hold, build the lightfall, nuke, repeat. Lastly, we have aristocratic introspection. When Eula crafts character talent material, she has a 10% chance to receive double the product. The same sort of passive as Albedo, which is something I use all too frequently, so yeah, really useful one to possess. But that's it for her talents. Let's move on to her constellations. So as you can see, I have lived up to our name here and have completely whaled out to Constellation 6. This is of course by no means necessary at all. Eula C0 with minimal talent investment is crazy enough and can rival other characters in her bracket with full investment, so there is no obligation to be had here at all once again. However, on the rare occasion that I do C6 a character, it is for good reason. Eula's constellations are excessively terrifying. At Constellation 1, we have Tidal Illusion. Every time Grimheart stacks are consumed while holding Eula's elemental skill, her physical damage is increased by 30% for 6 seconds. And each stack will therefore increase that duration by 6 seconds up to a maximum of 18 seconds. The strength of this constellation is not to be understated. Because you will always be going for that Grimheart consumption, the uptime of this buff is damn near constant. And it doesn't matter if you consume 1 or 2, the buff is still 30%. You won't have as much time at your disposal with 1, but still crazy stuff here. For Constellation 2, we have Lady of Seafoam. This decreases the cooldown of Eula's held elemental skill to the point where it is identical to the time of her press cooldown. With this character, time is everything. We want to be doing as much as we possibly can during the 7 seconds that our Lightfall Sword is up. And in regards to Constellation 1, being able to consume your stacks even faster makes maintaining that 30% physical damage buff even easier. And to further quantify, you're taking the hold of her elemental skill from 10 seconds down to 4. Which is nothing to scoff at. Constellation 3, Lauren's Pedigree, increases the level of Eula's elemental burst, which as previously stated is an astronomical increase, so yeah, speaks for itself. Constellation 4, the obstinacy of one's inferiors, makes it so that Lightfall Swords deal an additional 25% damage against enemies with less than half of their health remaining. This applies to both her Lightfall proper, as well as a mini version from her skill. And listen, you are already putting the hurt on your enemies with this stuff as is, so we are already neck deep in excessive damage, but hey, who doesn't want to hit hard? At Constellation 5, we have Chivalric Quality, which as expected, increases the level of Eula's elemental skill. But finally, at Constellation 6, we have Noble Obligation. Lightfall Swords created by Eula's elemental burst begin with 5 stacks immediately. This gives you a better place to build from and makes it feel a bit less wasteful to end the Lightfall prematurely. Furthermore, this constellation makes it so that normal attacks, elemental skills, and bursts have a 1 in 2 chance to provide the Lightfall Sword an additional stack of energy. This makes getting to that 30 stack point a lot easier and far more consistent. If you want to dabble into constellations but not go as far as C6, I would suggest either C1 or C2. They work pretty well together, and C2 especially makes using the character all the more fun. But that just about does it for her constellations. Let us move on to her weapons. When it comes to weapons, certainly her signature weapon, the Song of Broken Pines, is the first to come to mind, and rightfully so. But even without it, Eula has a number of claymore options that I really like a lot. In regards to 4 stars, we gotta give it up to the Snow Tomb Star Silver. The subset of this one being physical damage percentage, which we love. When you hit an enemy with normal or charged attacks, you at base have a 60% chance of creating an Everfrost Icicle above them, which deals AoE physical damage equal to 80% of your attack. But beyond that, opponents affected by Cryo are instead dealt 200%, and this can all occur once every 10 seconds. A very solid weapon across the board for her that is very easily obtained without any need for the gacha at all. So yeah, if you have Eula, no excuse not to have a good weapon on her. We also have the Prototype Archaic with a substat of attack percentage. With it, normal and charge attacks have a 50% chance to deal an additional 240% attack damage at base to enemies in a small AoE once every 15 seconds. Nothing all too specific to Eula, but a great sword indeed that again is really easy to obtain in game, so you have even less of an excuse to not have a good weapon. Past that, we have the Sacrificial Greatsword with the substat of Energy Recharge. Now perhaps this is the oddball pick of the 3 considering the lack of a damage increase substat, but listen guys, Eula is already doing so much damage as is that I think we can afford the loss in place of a bit of fun. Her elemental burst, as previously stated, does take a bit to build up, so being able to get it up there that much quicker is great. What's more is that the ability of this weapon makes it so that after dealing damage to an enemy by way of an elemental skill, that skill at base has a 40% chance to end its own cooldown once every 30 seconds. And remember, your burst resets the cooldown of your skill as is, so you can get the ball rolling on all cylinders with this weapon, which I think deserves a lot of credit in the fun department at the very least. Now in regards to 5-star weapons, the Skyward Pride, which also possesses a substat of energy recharge, is pretty great. Not only does its ability increase all damage by 8% at base, but it also makes it so that elemental skills, bursts, normal and charge attacks create vacuum blades that at Refinement 1 do 80% of their attack onto enemies in its way for 20 seconds or up to 8 such vacuum blades, what is generally just a solid benefit. But from there, we look to Wolf's Gravestone with a substat of attack percentage. Firstly, increasing attack by 20% at base, this weapon on a hit against an enemy with less than 30% HP remaining increases the attack of all party members by 40% for 12 seconds once every 30 seconds. Now, Eula kills things, so reducing something to 30% is pretty much light work for her. What is an almost universally desirable claymore that continues to impress. But lastly, as alluded to, we have Eula's signature weapon, the Song of Broken Pines, with the substat of physical damage percentage. The ability of this weapon firstly increases attack by 16% at base, and in the event that normal or charge attacks hit an opponent, you gain what is known as a Sigil of Whispers, which may be acquired once every 0.3 seconds. Once you have 4 such sigils, they are all therefore consumed, which triggers a buff for all nearby party members for 12 seconds. This increases normal attack speed by 12% and its damage by 20%. And once this occurs, you won't be able to gain sigils for 20 seconds, making this pretty much a 8-second wait time between buffs, which isn't bad at all. What makes this Eula's best weapon isn't simply the fact that it possesses the highest physical damage percentage increase or that constant 16% addition to attack damage. It's the fact that that attack speed again makes accumulating Lightfall energy for her elemental burst even easier. This thing, like pretty much everything else at Eula's disposal, is pretty scary. But now, let's take a look at Eula's preferred artifacts. When it comes to artifacts, we want to make Eula's nonsensical physical damage output that much more absurd. At that, 4-piece Pale Flame is an obvious choice. However, if you are not too confident in your artifact rolls, 2-piece Pale Flame, 2-piece Bloodstain for a combined 50% increase of physical damage is wonderful. Alternatively, if you are so inclined, you can get 2-piece Pale Flame or Bloodstained and 2-piece Blizzard Slayer to add to that cryo damage. Now, you can no doubt buff Eula's cryo damage output, but just know that she is better off with physical damage. But I would like to think that that shift can be fun as well. So to take that extra step forwards, we can go 4-piece Blizzard Slayer. It's not optimal, but she's more than strong enough to excuse it. For her sands, we want attack percentage, for her goblet, we want physical damage percentage, and for her circlet, we want crit rate, considering how important hitting a lot is to us. In regards to substats, nothing too outlandish: attack percentage, crit rate, crit damage, energy recharge, and elemental mastery. My artifact rolls haven't been the greatest, but I can still obliterate the entire game with her as is, so I'm chillin'. But that's just about it for her artifacts, so let's move on to her team comps. So in regards to ideal teams for Eula, with her almost exclusively playing the role of a main DPS, we will want to build around her accordingly. With that being said, the optimal elemental reaction for her is Superconduct for the reduction to physical damage resistance. With that being said, we don't need another cryo character on the team, as the benefit to that sort of resonance isn't going to do us much good. But in the way of electro characters, we have Beidou, who besides being a fun switch for her counter, possesses an elemental burst that increases our resistance to interruption, further allowing Eula to flinch in the face of no one, as well as reducing incoming damage and having electro damage jump from one enemy to another for that Superconduct that we spoke of. But for Beidou and her expensive elemental burst, we will need a battery in the form of Fischl. And Fischl works wonders for Eula thanks to Oz continuously dealing electro damage on the field. And lest we forget, elemental bursts such as this one also increase the energy stacks of our Lightfall swords. But to keep everyone up and running, we have Zhongli for shields, and I doubt I have to express how busted he is when it comes to ignoring the attacks of enemies, so yeah. Now admittedly, 2 5-stars is a bit of a steep team cost for most people, but luckily, Zhongli can be substituted to great effect by Xin Yan. As expressed with my previous uploads, I have yet to use her all that much, but Eula may very well be the cause for a change in that regard. Again, Xinyan is here for shields, but also her skill, now that's rock and roll, makes it so the characters shielded by her skill receive a 15% increase to physical damage, which is incredible. And if you have her Constellation 4, that very same skill furthermore decreases enemy physical damage resistance by 15% for 12 seconds. So yeah, she is pretty great with Eula. But again, like expressed in a previous upload, having this many Claymore users on a team may be strenuous for some, mostly on account of the weapons. If need be, you can substitute your 4th with Diona for shields and healing. And if you want to dial back on the Electro and feel confident with just one, you'll want to keep Fischl over Beidou, who you can replace with Rosaria, who by way of her skills can provide a buff to Eula's crit rate. And if you have her at C6, all the more reason, as her burst at that point reduces enemy physical resistance for 10 seconds, and her burst isn't expensive at all. But for fun's sake, getting back to that cryo artifact build, we can pick up Xingqiu and Chongyun along with a shielder and or healer. Xingqiu for getting the freeze, and Chongyun for the sake of making all your attacks as Eula deal cryo damage. But yeah guys, that just about does it for the Eula guide. A really impressive character that I look forward to playing with a whole lot more in the times to come. To follow this video, however, we will be taking a look at Eula as a character beyond the statistics, so if you're interested in that sort of thing in regards to her lore, be sure to subscribe to Whalestat with notifications on as we dive deep into this amazing game together. That being said, I have been your host, Slice of Otaku. Thank you all so much for watching and have an awesome day. I love you.